the humblest citizen in all the land, when clad in the arm of a righteous cause, is stronger than all the hosts of error. You shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold.
The inconvenience and the hardships of the banking holiday was a general rush by a large portion of our population to turn bank deposits into currency or gold. A rush so great that the soundest banks couldn't get enough currency to meet the demand.
For negative, short-sighted remedies will do more to weaken confidence in the dollar than strengthen it. And this administration, therefore, during its term of office, has no intention of imposing exchange controls, devaluing the dollar, raising trade barriers, or choking off our economic recovery.
Les Américains, quelle base des dollars au même titre que de l'or.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets. Now, what is this action? What does it mean for you?
We'll never regain price stability until we restore some form of gold backing to the dollar.
Very quickly, if you could answer another question, because I'm curious about this. When you wake up in the morning, do you care about the price of gold? Do you think gold is money?
No.
It's been money for 6,000 years. Somebody reversed that and eliminated that economic law.
Well, it's an asset. I mean, it's the same. Would you say Treasury bills are money? I don't think they're money either, but they're a financial asset.
Why do central banks hold it?
Well, it's a form of reserves.
Why don't they hold diamonds?
Well, it's tradition, long-term tradition.
Some people still think it's money.
Do you own gold?
Oh, yeah. I do. I think anybody, let's be clear that I think anybody who doesn't, if you're going to own a currency, if you don't, it's not sensible not to own gold. Now, it depends on the amount of gold. But if you don't own, I don't know, 10% if you don't have that, and then depends on the world, then there's no sensible reason other than you don't know history and you don't know the economics of it.
Hello and welcome to the inaugural first episode of the SD Bullion Gold and Silver Podcast. My name is James Anderson, and I'm excited to be your host on this journey. This podcast is brought to you by SDBullion.com, where you'll find physical investment-grade gold, platinum, palladium, and silver bullion at the absolute lowest prices online, guaranteed. My intention in this podcast series is to give you useful information based on my more than 10 years of firsthand experience in the real-world physical bullion market. From researching, buying, selling, shipping, storing, and making painful mistakes along the way, I've attained and more than doubled the supposed expert level 10,000 hours required, and therefore I suppose I have some valuable opinions and experiences to share with you. Now, before we jump into the show, I just want to give you a brief bio on myself for those who don't know me. Now, this podcast series is going to take us on a journey together, and I hope we can get to know each other more as we go along. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. After graduating high school there, I moved down to Loyola University, New Orleans, where I got an undergrad degree in finance. It was there that I was introduced to Austrian economics, and most notably from Professor Walter Block, who later became the economic advisor to Ron Paul's 2008 presidential campaign. While I was at Loyola New Orleans, I became rather enveloped in Austrian school thought, and I still subscribe to Ron Paul's message of peace, sound money, and limited government. After graduating college, I spent time overseas in Latin America, learning a second language and getting a broader sense of macroeconomics and geopolitics. And luckily, I got exposed to things that you will only get exposed to if you actually live in a foreign country. I got to see how many various cultures and economies and banking sectors worked in South America and in Central America. And from there, I made my way to Southern California, where I started investing in precious metals and ultimately began working in the precious metals industry. I've worked with some of the largest gold and silver dealers in the world ever since the 2008 financial crisis. And I've also published numerous investing guides and videos that have been watched and downloaded by millions of gold and silver investors online. Education has really become my true passion in the space. And it's because of my experience I've gotten to see firsthand pretty much everything that goes on in this industry. I feel it's my duty to really help investors understand critically important things within the space. Why you should protect your savings and earnings with some physical precious metal ownership, and maybe most importantly, how you can do so safely and intelligently. How you can perform proper due diligence on a private company you might do business with. How you can achieve precious metal price exposure while limiting risks. How you can get a fair and honest deal when looking to trade physical bullion. These questions may seem simple, but they're not. This first introductory episode, we're going to simply discuss what is bullion. This is actually the first topic I cover extensively in our new ebook entitled 21st Century Gold Rush. And you can download it for free at sdbullion.com/book. It's kind of strange in this industry to be selling a product, a financial product essentially that's unregulated, and then not giving people the whole education or the understanding as to what they're doing or why they should do it, or specifically how to do it intelligently, as opposed to, just saying, here are the products, figure it out, or call us. That's a lot of work. I would just rather give the end user the tools, and let them do the work and then call us if they have other questions, right? So it's essentially what I'm helping SD Bullion do. So what is this podcast about? Obviously, it's pretty self-explanatory. SD Bullion Gold Silver Podcast. It's going to be majority time. It's going to be about precious metals, right? But anyone who's been around precious metals understands that precious metals encompasses essentially everything from the cost of currency, interest rates across the board. You're talking about equity markets. You're talking about currencies, FX markets. It's essentially bullion, gold and silver in a physical space. I would argue is basically the foundation of finance. It's essentially where money comes from. It started maybe before then. We were using shells and various types of other currencies, but ultimately it's been decided, I think, throughout human history that money has been pretty much gold and silver for millennia and multiple millennia, and it's been the one that's been the most successful and the most proven. So that's what we'll be discussing. We're going to be talking about all types of subjects, and we're going to get very specific with all types of subjects. And it's not going to just be a general how you doing? Gold went up $20 this week, or gold went down $20 this week. Damn manipulators. Or yeah, it's going to the moon. It's not going to be that. We're going to talk about. Basically, I want it to be like you came and sat down to my desk at work and we got real nerdy about this subject, right? I want you to be able to get a deeper understanding, a deeper view of what's happening, right? That's what I want to get across here. Okay, so let me define just in general terms what bullion is. So bullion is typically in our industry is a physical precious metal that's struck in a bar, coin, or round form, almost entirely valued by its melt value alone. So how does bullion differ from other asset classes? And the bullion products, they're like one of the lone investment vehicles you can own that has no risk of other parties failing or underperforming on promises made. Nearly all equities, bonds, currencies, cryptocurrencies, fiat currencies, even forms of real estate, they require the performance of others or the infrastructure for their value. And conversely, you got physical bullion products, they don't rely on anyone to maintain their value. Physical bullion is by nature protected from bankruptcy and it's able to retain its value amongst future investors. Now, contrary to some claims, bullion does have some forms of counterparty risk. Essentially, the risk you have is from theft, whether it be from individuals or governments, maybe they nationalize it, etc. So that has happened in history before, obviously. In the book that we're creating, the Gold Rush book, we're going to discuss various methodologies and means to lessen and insure against and to avoid the potentiality of someone stealing your bullion. Bullion in hand, it's one of the most private assets you can own outright today. It's tough to locate, track, trace. Bullion buying and selling privacy nuances are also discussed in the ebook we're making. And of course, with any capital gains or losses you make when buying or selling bullion, you should consult your tax professional on the matter. How are we doing it? This new website at SD Bullion is going to have a few different educational tools that are going to be handy, I think, for the newcomers or even people who've been in this space for a little while and maybe want to learn a little bit extra. As well, there's going to be information regarding just general macroeconomic situation as far as, total global debt. How does it stand now from comparing it now from, where it was 2007? I can tell you right now it's up over 45% since 2007. So if essentially the crisis that we had in 2007 was a symptom of having too much currency and too much debt out there, what we've done is essentially done the same thing and added more debt to the fire. And no one's really come clean about who's bankrupt and who's not. And so at some point, the pretending will have to end and we'll have another financial crisis. And hopefully this time the central banks don't step in, the governments just step in and get this thing cleaned up. Because structurally, this is playing itself out. It's taking too long. Just fix it. Let's pull the bandage and get it cleaned up so we can move on with our lives and our economies. And everyone can feel a little bit more safe with their money. All right, so why am I doing this? All right, that's pretty simple. I personally believe that you should have a right to save what you earn in this world. People a lot of times find it difficult to make money, or maybe find it easy to make money. It's not hard to, maybe they have really good talents when it comes to business and they can create a business and essentially make a lot of money quickly. That's great. But there's a lot of skill involved as well with keeping money. It's a very difficult thing to do. One of my colleagues the other day was laughing about how he thinks it's funny how people can make millions of dollars in their business, and then they turn around and they're just like, hey, financial advisor, take care of this. I mean, to me, that makes no sense. Like, we spend, I don't know, a good half of our precious time on this earth trying to acquire savings. Like, why would we turn around and just, hey, stranger, here, take care of this. And then, or hey, expert. And most of the times these people aren't expert. They're just freaking salesmen, just putting on an act, right? They don't actually do any real analysis. They're not actually that gifted or actually interested in it. They're just simply there to sell a product, right? So he was laughing about it. And I just remarked to him, I said, look, keeping your money is really, really hard. Like, you just look at new money people who make money in entertainment and stuff, and how many people like that end up bankrupt, or they don't pay their taxes or do something stupid and the IRS goes after them, something like that. It's just, the world is full of risks and you just have to be conscious of it. This picture that I'm going to show you on the screen, obviously this is a podcast, so you're not going to understand what I'm talking about visually, but I'll try to describe it here. Let me pull this thing up. It's pretty damn funny. Okay, so I'm back. I've got the picture pulled up. Hopefully, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. And if you're on the podcast, here's the description. It's a picture that I used to see when I would go online in around 2005, 6, 7, doing my research. And you'd see it a lot, different websites, around the internet. It's done by this guy, D's Illustration. And some of the pictures he would make were like conspiratorial New World Order stuff, and they were just ridiculous and but funny. This one is kind of funny, I think. You're basically seeing three people who are running, like they're running from an imploding building or something. And there are three people running over a bridge. And the bridge is very, very thin, and it looks kind of like the bridge maybe from Indiana Jones, except you can actually see this one. It's not invisible. They're running from Federal Reserve notes, a landmass of Federal Reserve notes that have been bitten by alligators who are jumping up from the crevasse and trying to bite the people as they run over the bridge. And the people running over the bridge are trying to get across the crevasse to gold coins and looks like silver bars. So it's three people running with their hair on fire, trying to get from, I suppose, Federal Reserve note risk all across the crevasse over into the gold bullion safety and I assume silver safety that the artist was trying to portray. So whether or not you agree with it, it's first of all, it looks hilarious. It looks absolutely ridiculous, and but it does remind me of the fact that it is kind of risky if you're trying to traverse from Federal Reserve notes or any other fiat currency, and you're trying to go and buy physical gold or silver. there are a lot of alligators or sharks, what have you, however you want to describe it. But there's a lot of con men and a lot of bad things that you could end up buying, trying to go from supposed risk to safety. There are a lot of traps that you could fall into. And so we cover a lot of that very explicitly in the guide that we're creating for SD Bullion. And I explain to whoever reads it that there are various tools you can use to identify, whether it's bait and switch, high pressure sales call, where it's like you have 100 people working for this company and 80 of them are going to be fired within a few months, and all they do is drum up the first dead lead they can get to the account manager, and the account manager gets on the phone with the person, and so it's 2 versus 1 hard sales tactic, and they've already got the funds wired to them from the person that's supposedly going to buy maybe gold or silver, and they get on the phone and they say, hey, the bullion's okay, but we got these other coins that'll do better, or these other coins just have better potential, and really, and the truth is, those other coins are going to be twice the price of the bullion, and then when you actually go to sell, you're going to realize, oh wow, gold or silver, the spot price doubled, but I still am at a loss. That type of stuff is still happening to this day. Those types of companies exist. Those people, they exist, and they get caught. And typically what they do is after they've gotten caught, they will liquidate that company and move on and start another. And so these people typically get away with it. They've gotten away with it for decades. It's basically an act that's been going on ever since legalized gold from 1975 onward. And I'm sure it was going on before then in some form or fashion. So that's just one of the types of scams that we cover. There's other types. There's off-exchange leverage account scams, and there are people who essentially, either because they're just extremely greedy, they will just take the funds from the end user and never even deliver the product, or they'll go bankrupt in the process just because of negligence or sheer stupidity. So there's ways to find that out. Like, before you want to go buy from any dealer, I would suggest you go and check out the latest reviews and make sure that people are getting their product within a reasonable time and there's no bullshit going on behind the scenes. Sorry for using that language, but I'm just being very frank here, and I don't want to see anyone get hurt. And pretty much there's been, 6, 7, 8 train wrecks I've seen since I've been in this industry. And there's a whole host of more. And every time I go and see it, it breaks my heart, because you see people who are, trying to get to a place of safety, and in that crevasse, when they're trying to cross from those Federal Reserve notes over to the bullion, which should be pretty safe for them, they've lost a good portion of what they've earned in their life, or whether they were bequeathed that capital from their forefathers or their parents or someone else who loved them. And now some charlatan or some shark or some idiot, imploded its company, and this person cannot get that money back. It's over. That money's gone. So I essentially don't want to see anyone that's listening on this podcast to have that happen to them. And that's essentially why this guide has been made. There's tools in there for you to avoid any of that kind of stuff. There's extra tools in there too. If you've been someone who's already been buying it, I'm sure you'll find some sections of that guide to be very helpful and educational and insightful. So finally, we're getting into the section of why. Why am I doing this? Well, I essentially believe in property rights. I believe that people should have the choice to use whatever money they want. And, that's a basic human right in my belief. And so that's essentially it. It's like you should have a place of safety and a place where someone can't steal from you. And in this world, sadly, there's really nothing like that. Everything has some risk, as far as value-wise, it could go down. And there's places where, you essentially can lose everything. And with bullion, at least for sure that that'll be worth something in the future. It'll always be worth something. Precious metals will not vanish. The only risk you really have with precious metals is someone just stealing it outright. That's essentially that's the counterparty risk you have, is just having someone steal it. So the why I'm doing this is essentially to make sure that you have some wealth that's foundational wealth, that you have something of value that lasts. That is the point of having an allocation to physical bullion. It is the foundation of your wealth. And right now, this day and age, it makes a lot of sense. And the value of precious metals versus virtually all other asset classes is relatively low. So right now to be buying is actually a rather good time. If you're someone who's just stepping in this space, good timing. Yeah, you're here at a nice time. If you came into this space in 2011, there was a big hype train running. A lot of people were running headfirst into it, and they probably turned off by this entire thing. They probably turned me off about 10 minutes ago because they don't want to be reminded about a mistake they feel like they made. That's the way a bull market works. Typically, you start out with smart money, it ramps up, and then there's a bear trap. There's a fall down in the price, and everyone starts questioning, why they bought it in the first place. And a lot of people quit and they stop and they sell it. That's where we are right now. And my hunch is where we move next is higher prices, higher values, and then eventually into some crazy mania that like what's going on in Bitcoin right now. That's likely where we're headed with precious metals. So that's the why. It's essentially to make sure that people get to keep what they've earned. Okay, that is it. That's it. I'm done for this podcast. Sorry, it was a little longer than I thought. I hope you got a little bit out of it. And I promise, just go to episode 2. In episode 2, you're going to find me there. And we'll be discussing subjects from the guide that we're creating at SD Bullion. As well, we're probably going to interview an expert in the space on the subject that we're covering in each episode. So do come back, and I appreciate you listening to this podcast, and look forward to hopefully delivering another podcast to your ears very soon. Love you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Free gold coin or a free Snickers bar?
I want the gold. I want the gold.
Thanks, give me the gold.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a meltdown. It is a run on gold with people foaming at the mouth to get it.
Give me the gold.
When I talked to the head of deliveries for Comex NYMEX, I said, well, what if like 4% of the people want delivery? He says, oh, Kyle, that never happens. We rarely ever get a 1% delivery. And I said, well, what if it does happen? And he says, well, price will solve everything. I said, thanks, give me the gold.
Gold is a currency. It is still, by all evidences, the premier currency where no fiat currency, including the dollar, can match it.